Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Accelerate Yale webinar, Africa, Opportunities to Invest in Innovation and Impact. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. I'm Yale class of 1993, and I'm a director of Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels. Tonight's webinar is brought to you by Accelerate Yale. Accelerate Yale is a global community of alumni and friends of Yale who are engaged in innovation, tech, and entrepreneurship. We're delighted to have tonight's webinar made possible by the Yale Alumni Association's shared interest groups. Before we begin tonight's discussion, I'd like to just review a few operational items with you that you already know. First of all, this webinar is being recorded and all participants are muted. The session will be 1 hour and we'll reserve the final 25 minutes for your questions. If you have a question you would like to submit to our guest speaker, please do so via the Q&A button at the bottom bar of your screen. And now I would like to first introduce our moderator for this evening and then introduce our guest speaker. Our moderator for this evening is Sam Hendel. He is Yale class of 2003. He is a co-founder of Dataminer, the leading real-time AI company for event and risk detection. In addition, he is an experienced professional in the investment management industry and serves as president and portfolio manager of Levin Easterly Partners, the value investing firm. He specializes in arbitrage, event-driven, and value investing across all sectors. He is a co-founder of Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels. Next, our guest speaker for this evening is Kodjo Adovor. He is MBA 18, shout out to SOM. He founded Kevi Capital, LLC, an investment fund focused on education and healthcare development and investments in Africa. He's currently raising a Pan-Africa fund called the Kevi Africa Innovation Fund 1, focused on healthcare and innovation. Kodjo is a co-founder and co-host of the Impact on Record podcast, which engages in conversations with impact investors, social entrepreneurs, and the impacted. Kodjo is also an entrepreneur and has founded companies in various industries in Africa. In his free time, he is a wine sommelier and is currently a certified Vinitaly Italian wine ambassador. Kodjo has an MBA from the Yale University School of Management with a focus in finance, strategy, and asset management. He holds an MS degree in financial mathematics from the University of Chicago and a BS in physics from Hampton University. And now I would like to turn it over to Sam to start the conversation with our guest, Kodjo.
Great, Wendy, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Kodjo, thank you for doing this from Ghana, pretty late at night for you. Want to get this started. Kodjo, you have a very, very interesting background, including as a sommelier, as Wendy mentioned, and I will ask you about that later. But first, I'd love to hear about your entrepreneurial journey, really from commodity trading, which you did for a number of years, and how you made the decision to really change your career to attend SOM and then launch Kevi Capital. So maybe we'll start with your decision to leave an industry and go to Yale.
Yeah. So I came from physics. It's an easy transition from physics to financial mathematics. Obviously you deal with a lot of models and all that. I was happy to deal in the commodities market as a quant, specialized in valuation on the trade floor, in several organizations throughout my career. What it did was gave me great insight into determinants of value, the parameters that determine what comes out. And then obviously commodities, you can see them, whether it's corn or natural gas, at least you see the use of it, electricity, all that. So I had a good career there, but I knew I always wanted to come back to Africa, and that wouldn't be an easy transition from very high finance on the trade floor of a bank to do exactly that in Africa, where markets might not be as developed for those kind of commodities. So I decided then to go to Yale SOM and be more of an investor, still bring in some of my training, quantitative finance, but bringing the whole person this time. Um, you know, I think my life as a trade, on the trade floor was more intellectual. I was a quant. I used my background, but I wanted to bring my personality to my work. And I'm very African, unforgivably African. So so that was what led me to Yale SOM. And obviously Yale embraced that vision I had, and did well to promote what I was trying to do as much as as I could. And then while I was at Yale, I left the bank and started Kevi. And once I was done, I moved back to Ghana, and been working on it ever since.
And can you tell us a little more about Kevi? What's the genesis of the fund? What are your goals over the next, call it 5-10 years, in terms of investing for a return, but also for an impact return as well?
Yeah, so when I was at Yale, I decided to do this, and the primary focus of it was student housing. I saw that as the channel for me to do a couple of things. So in Africa, throughout most of our history, universities were meant for the 1% of the 1%, the people who are going to go into the government and help, the people who run these countries they're going to go to civil service, for all these colonial governments that were here. So it was never built for the masses. And then over the years, University of Ghana, for example, was started in 1948. Obviously, over the years, the need for college education has grown, but the infrastructure hasn't grown. The statistic is that in Africa, the population of the universities double every 10 years. University of Ghana took in close to 30,000 students last year. Obviously, housing never catches up. So you find, a parent who sends their kids south from the north, who want their kids to be in a safe place, and there's no housing. So I came in here looking to do student housing because I believe the impact could be huge for college education. But for me, it was also a channel, if you're building for university, to kind of steer them from some of this very colonial education to a more dynamic education where they could, put in a little bit more entrepreneurship into the curriculum, so that when people finish university, they're not sitting at home looking for a job. Literally, they think a teller job at a bank is heaven, right? When you have a lot of talent, you have a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of, begging to be done. So it was my way of believing that I could make an impact and have a return in infrastructure. But obviously, once you're on the campus, you're dealing with the vice chancellor, the opportunity to try to steer them towards something that would be a lot more what we should do. I mean, there's a famous quote that our education should be defined by our needs, and we have enough tellers, or you don't need a college education to be a bank teller. So then we should channel more of our people into entrepreneurial ventures. So that's still ongoing. Ultimately, you realize that when you cash flow, investment in infrastructure, you're gonna need local money, because we're dealing with local currencies that fluctuate a lot. So you're gonna need local pension funds. So it's a longer process in that regard. Then I came into an opportunity here, and this is the fund that I'm raising now, which is definitely a more Pan-African fund. It's some of what I'm doing now. I got a call from a Yale SOM alum. He reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he said, "Hey, I'm at Johnson & Johnson. I think he was SOM 1990. Like, look, we do this Africa Innovation Challenge where we bring in all these companies into to pitch, and then we choose some of them and we invest in them. So in 2018, they ran this Africa Innovation Challenge. They had 350 companies apply. They picked 3 of them. And then in 2019, they did something similar, and they had 910 applicants, and they picked 6 of them. So then I asked the question, what happens to number 7 to number 25? He said nothing, but we had them sign a release. So if you want to look at them, see what they do, I can send them to you. So long story short, he did. It was mostly healthcare, a lot of, people trying to do things in different countries. What I saw in that list was, say, for example, electronic medical records. They're fragmented. So you find one in Rwanda with 50,000 patients, one in Uganda, Tanzania, then you go to Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya. You put all those together, and I figured, hey, maybe we could put a portfolio together of these companies, invest in them, put them on the same platform, and maybe you start with 500,000 patients around the continent, and then grow that to a couple of million, grow that to 5 million, and now you begin to build sort of an African healthcare electronic medical record system that can spit out data and be meaningful and have a meaningful impact. So we've been doing that. We pitched to an LP. They were very interested in what we're doing, and we're in that process as we speak.
That's great. That's great. And I want to dig into the Johnson & Johnson Africa Innovation Fund a little more. But before that, one you mentioned, part of it got started. This is a guy who is from SOM who kind of caught wind of what you were doing. At Accelerate Yale and all over the university, we're trying to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem at Yale and really, create more of that connectivity. And we have that in the U.S. Stanford has it. We have it in Silicon Valley. The New York scene is very robust right now. I would love to hear your perspective on what the entrepreneurial scene and environment is like in Accra, and also across the continent, and what you've experienced.
Yeah, it's it's great what you're doing. I mean, Yale has a long history, a very diverse one, with people in different industries. And if we came together, like you're trying to bring us together, not only across different industries, but obviously different regions with somebody like me on here, definitely you're gonna get all kinds of growth and all kinds of very interesting stuff coming through. So I'm very excited about that possibility. Over here on the continent, I spend a lot of time in Ghana, and I spend some time in Mozambique, and some of the time in Kenya as well. Obviously, Nigeria is literally next door, and then a little bit of time in South Africa. Our continent is a young continent, so there's definitely always pent up desires to be more entrepreneurial. There's only so many bank teller jobs for a college graduate. So there's that desire. And also recently there was data on women entrepreneurs around the world. And, Africa ranked very high in women's participation in business. In Ghana, I think we were one of the top countries. So there's definitely that spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit. It's growing, and hopefully we can tap into that and scale it, which is what I'm trying to do here.
And in terms of scaling, how do you think about entrepreneurship? From more from a large scale. What are the ingredients that need to come together, and what's the environment like for raising capital that you've seen in Accra versus maybe what you saw in the U.S. and how do we all sort of find ways to increase that? Africa is an extraordinarily entrepreneurial continent, and it's quite fragmented. And I have a question for you on that later, on some of the fragmentation. But I would love to hear your thoughts on what's needed to take entrepreneurship to the next level on the continent. Go for it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's a great question. Scale is important. And, you know, as much as we're very entrepreneurial, women on the continent, very entrepreneurial, a lot of these are very micro businesses. And it's because capital is not organized. You know, it wasn't long ago that in Ghana, we started allowing pension funds, private pension funds, and then allowing them to invest in alternative assets. So a lot of that is coming together. There's a lot of groups now that are looking to gather money and do that, you know, across the continent. So definitely, from my perspective, we need structure. And definitely for too long, we've been practicing capital, you know, capitalism without capital. So definitely more money, you know, there's no room for failure. You can't have an entrepreneurial environment if you can't fail, as we've seen in California. I mean, people have failed several times, they keep coming back, and then you hit that home run. So
failure is a badge of honor for entrepreneurs in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Is it not that way on the, like, is there any room for failure when the capital isn't as plentiful?
It's difficult because if capital is limited, you have one shot, and it's not a long, you know, you don't have long to prove that. And not only do we need capital, but we need it for longer. You know, you need to allow somebody to play it out, you know, and let it play itself out, and let the business, you know, kind of see its life too. Let the J curve begin to turn. We don't have that. So you see a lot of people doing the short term, you know, buying and selling like we do on the trade floor, because, you know, that's all you can do with money that is not patient. So these are some of the challenges to scaling. Even though the entrepreneur spirit is there, we definitely need capital. We need it organized. We need it in an environment where people understand money. And then that money brings operational discipline. And that operational discipline can bring results. This is my.
And in terms of, you know, in the U.S., the joke for the TV show Silicon Valley, that if you're making money, then you've already failed. And you know,
Yes.
you have investment round after investment round into unprofitable businesses with good KPIs. Does that exist yet in Accra? Does that exist? You know, are you seeing that sort of in your experience, or is there still sort of a need to, you know, establish companies like Amazon and Netflix, which have never really made any money in their existence, but are able to raise at higher and higher valuations?
Yeah, that's not here yet. I mean, and you know, most people think, you know, if I'm in business, what am I doing? I have to make money. So then they go into retail, they go into farming something that will grow for, I mean, most people don't even have the capital to I was helping a client recently to plant palm trees. It takes 3 years to grow palm trees, to harvest it, and, you know, start making money from it. What am I gonna do in those 3 years? You know, it becomes a challenge. So yeah, that needs to change, but you know, definitely patient capital coming in would help some of that begin to change.
Right, and I want to pivot a little bit on a similar topic, but, you know, impact investing, and you host a podcast on impact investing, and part of your thesis for Kevi is that all the, you know, we had a discussion before this call that you know, that you want to have, you know, that the money that goes into the companies that you're investing in also needs to be societally impactful. How do you balance the need for a monetary return with also the need for a societal return?
Yeah, I mean, I have one principle, and which is that if you invest in Africa, I mean, if it's organized money that comes into a fund, you're definitely gonna make money if you have somebody who's on the ground actually knows what is going on. As in, you're not sitting in London or New York trying to invest on the continent. The second principle when it comes to impact is that don't try to do anything here that you can't do in a European city or in New York, right? And I think once we get past that, I think there's enough return for everybody. But any capital that comes in has to understand that you can't sit in New York and London and invest here in any meaningful way. Maybe you invest in more mature companies, but growing companies need their hands to be held. What has happened locally is that the pension funds understand the Yale model of, taking long-term approaches to investment. So they're willing to consider alternative investments, and they're willing to be that anchor on a fund or an investment. And as a result, make it more comfortable for foreign money to come in. So those opportunities are gradually becoming reality.
And there have been a lot of successful companies that have been started in Africa, and there are a lot of legacy companies. So and the telcos, MTN, and Safaricom that are investing. Is there an environment where the larger corporates are investing in some of the newer technologies? Are you seeing that at all?
That's beginning to, what you call corporate venture, right? It's beginning to become a thing. Even here in Ghana, there's a shipping and logistics company with relatively young CEO and founder who is sponsoring a lot of your Shark Tank like activity. And the goal of all of that is to let people know that there's opportunities for you to source money to grow a business or to get into a business. And he's doing it in an organized way. He has a long track record of success in that area. So a lot of that is coming in. And you only hope that a lot more of it will come in. Again, it means we need more investment professionals like me. Our colleagues who are stuck in New York and in London, it's good. After a while, you got to come back and be a part of it, and let's grow this thing together.
And how do sort of we as a society promote more equity on the continent in terms of if I were to invest in a company in Africa, I think one of the important things is to have local ownership, and it's great that you're there on the ground. One, what type of when you invest in a company locally, how do you add value to the company, and how do you think that people outside of Africa can invest in a meaningful way while avoiding some of the colonial issues that have occurred politically in the past, and making sure there's real on the ground equity ownership from Black and brown people on the continent?
Yeah, it's I always use it's the golden rule across the board, is that you do unto others what you want others to do unto you, which is that if you are in New York and you were going to invest in Birmingham, Alabama, you would want to know the culture there and how they do things, and how and then respect the way they do things in order to be able to successfully invest in Birmingham. The same thing generally here. Preferably, if you wanted to invest in Alabama, it would be good if you had a partner who lived in Birmingham. It's the same thing here. I think it be like we've talked about in the past, increasingly becoming important to have a local partner that understands how to navigate all the idiosyncrasies and the externalities that come with doing business in these parts. And it's not any different from some of the challenges you face doing business anywhere. So the emphasis definitely is on partnership. I think one of the biggest needs here is that people need markets, right? If I'm an entrepreneur here, so I bring capital to an entrepreneur, what I can add value to that money that I give is to help that entrepreneur find new markets. And if I partner with you, hopefully then you will see value in bringing markets to that opportunity, because those markets instill a certain level of operational discipline. They instill a certain level of desire to meet certain international standards. And then as a result, it becomes something that everybody sees and wants to do that. So these are the opportunities, and these are the ways we can help local companies.
And in terms of sort of when you invest in a company, what type of interest do you take in terms of are you advising them kind of on the business a full business structure? Are you, I guess, just investing and sort of letting them do their thing, or are you taking an active role? And how do you balance the desire of the entrepreneur that you're investing in, and also your experience and education to bring to bear in terms of helping them really scale up their business?
Yeah, traditionally that's been very tough, right? Most people just see the business as an extension of themselves. So this idea that you're gonna come and tell them how to run certain things or was difficult. But thankfully that is changing, right? It's no longer the case that you see a business that is run by one person. It's a little bit more organized, a little bit more. This thing should be able to run without the founder and without the guy whose vision it was. So more people are willing to be open to the possibility of you bringing money. And then because there's so much to do, I mean, it's not hard to fight over turf when you bring money into a growing company and you're trying to add value, because there's so much to do, the logistics and the technology and streamlining things. So for younger companies, it's a lot easier than older, more mature ones that have a way of doing things.
Yep, that makes sense. And then the last question on this topic, then I want to ask you one more on Kevi and Johnson & Johnson, but last kind of on this interesting topic, kind of a broader talk about investing in Africa and impact. The continent's very fragmented, and the majority of that is legacy colonialism that was divided on geographic areas, but unfortunately not really paying attention to some of the tribal barriers and relationships. How do you navigate some of the issues, in particular in Accra in Ghana, when you're surrounded by francophone countries, and potentially your same tribe is in a country next door to you and they all speak French?
Yeah, and this is exactly, I come from the Volta region of Ghana, and the history of it is that it was divvied up. It was German colony, and after the First World War, it was divvied up between the French and the Brits. 1/3 of it came to the Brits, which was Ghana, and 2/3 of it went to Togo. Literally, my grandmother has homes in both parts of the border, and it's a big issue. It's a big issue in several places. I mean, I spent time in Mozambique, and Mozambique is literally it's a long country, but it's a combination of like so many different peoples. I think the solution, hopefully it gets implemented, implemented well, is the Africa Free Trade Agreement that was passed recently, which is actually headquartered here in Accra, where these borders become softer. The truth is that the Europeans are still running some of these countries. I mean, Togo next door, where 2/3 of my tribe is, has had one family run the country since 1963. Ivory Coast on the other side, the president is going for a third term because, the French like the stable hands that he's brought to running that country, and there are many benefits to them for that. So it's difficult. It's not something of the past. It's still actively what is happening right now. So how do you navigate that? It's a challenge, but Ghana and Nigeria, we jump over the two little countries in the middle and try to get things done as much as we can. But the truth is, I mean, the people in the middle are all our people, and hopefully we can get to a point where you can literally, like we've done. I mean, my family is a mix of people from Nigeria, people from Ghana, and the family is spread all the way to Senegal. Ivory Coast, we have a lot of family there. So the hope is that these will be softer. It used to be in tribal Africa, if you love us, you became one of us. and hopefully it'll be that again. And then we can do business, we can do trade, we can interact with each other. But hopefully, the French will leave these countries alone, and we can actually roll. But yeah, I think that we have our own challenges in that we have to do things to make, to be better enough to be able to knock those doors down.
In terms of scale, so going back to Kevi, you're looking at companies that specialize in electronic medical records across a variety of different countries. How do you take all these different businesses that are country only focused and create the scale to sort of merge their back offices together, and treat them as more of a Pan-African company that can be a consolidator, rather than all these individual siloed companies, only country by country?
Yeah, the beauty of it is that it's technology, so it makes it a lot easier. It's also that we can navigate former British colony countries a lot easier. So Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, all follow these old British rules, and that work to our advantage in our strategy, because ultimately the laws are similar, and you can, but the fact that it's technology makes it a lot easier. And I think that this would be the future for the continent, is all this digitization that is going on, and COVID has brought attention to a lot of that. And definitely would help move things along where the borders become less important.
Perfect. So let's move on. Let's do some Q. I certainly have at least one more question to ask at the end, but let's move on to Q&A. I'm going to invite Wendy back on here to ask some audience questions.
Sure. If I may, I have a question before we dive into the audience questions. So, Kodjo, you said earlier that Ghana rated quite highly on the index for female entrepreneurs globally. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about women entrepreneurs in Ghana and what you've seen in some other African countries. Are there particular industries or types of businesses that you think women are doing exceptionally well on the continent? And where are the areas for opportunities for female entrepreneurs in different African countries? And you might want to speak just to Ghana or what you've seen in Nigeria and some other countries.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a great point. One of the areas that women are thriving is the fast-moving consumer goods area, and that's an important area for Africa because it has wide-ranging impacts, and it's generally what we consume on a regular basis. So who has more insights into that than our mothers who run the homes, or who consume a lot of these products themselves? So we see a lot of that, and if I came up with another fund, I would focus particularly in that area because of the opportunity to invest in a lot more women founders. It ties neatly into manufacturing because once you're going into that area, then you're building a factory eventually as you get bigger. That I see healthcare as well as an area that women are very strong and going into, and education is another area, and also media and content. You have a lot of young people. We index very highly in a lot of the usage in Twitter, and Sam would know a little bit about that. We index very highly in some of these things and the engagement that comes with that. And this is what has generated a lot of interest in providing freer and freer access to Wi-Fi and getting on the web. So I think media and content will be very interesting in the future because, these phones in people's hands are definitely very powerful. in monetizing a lot of what they could do. It's interesting.
Excellent. Thank you, Kodjo. All right, so we have some great questions here in the Q&A. So I'm going to, you have the president of the Kodjo fan club is Jim Seymour over here with all his great questions. I'm going to, I'm just teasing you, Jim. So I'm going to choose some of Jim's and intersperse them with some of the others. Jim would like to know the following. How do you deal with corruption in which, for example, the vice chancellor of a university is more interested in what is in a deal for him rather than in what is best for this university or its students?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm very familiar with some of the details of that. So, and it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge, but the need in these universities are there, and I think, I mean, across the board, you see that because we don't have strong institutions where the vice chancellor feels like he's gonna be okay eventually. In the US, people take for granted the fact that the system is gonna make the vice chancellor okay, so he doesn't need to pursue short-term personal interests. So it's all part of what I believe I'm doing here, is that when everything else is okay, when the vice chancellor knows that when he leaves these doors, he can find gainful employment, hopefully he doesn't find the need for short-term gain and the need to try to do side deals, and that he's gonna focus on his job and execute it. It's a tough situation, but yeah, I go into a lot of these things very determined to not pay anybody on the side and just do honest work. And eventually, what gets everybody is that every political person likes the sword cutting ceremony, and something has to be built for them to cut the sword. So you're gonna have to open that building because there's a lot of pressure to make sure these buildings are built. So yeah, it's a tough situation, but if you balance them right and you do the right things, and if you have local partners, when things get tough, you can call on people, and I think that there's ways to get that done.
Okay, excellent. So we have a question from Veronica. How can an average African youth who already has the entrepreneurship mindset access mentorship and finance?
A lot of that is changing. There many ways. I am on LinkedIn a lot, so a lot of them reach out to me, and if you're credible and if you want to put in all the hard work, increasingly you have groups and mentors that will definitely help you through that process. So yeah, I mean, a lot of our culture, a lot of people don't know how to reach out and be bold and, ask for what they try to be respectful and go through the regular channels. But if you're young, I encourage all of them to grab what you want and be bold about it. Yeah, a lot of civic organizations are going up. A lot of incubators are going up. Sometime in the future, I'm going to have that as well as a means of collecting talent across the board. So there are a lot more opportunities for a young person to get mentorship and possibly money in these environments now.
And I'll just add, that's, it's not, we're very broad on what we do at Accelerate Yale, but Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels are really looking to put people together. We're looking to create bridges for this type of mentorship, to find Yale alumni who are willing to back a young startup. Please don't, utilize the Yale network and what we're trying to build here to connect to great entrepreneurs like Kodjo.
Yep. Okay, here is another great question from Jonathan. We hear over and over when we pitch to diaspora investors that they are reluctant to invest back home because they've been burned so many times by close friends and family. How do we get more Africans to invest in Africa?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a very good question, and I've been trying to prove this myself for so long. There's a lot of money out there. There's all these Africans there's all these Nigerians. I lived in Houston for many years, and I could have a party and 100 people in there, and at least 90 of them are like Nigerian doctors or engineers in the oil and gas companies or in in Houston's medical center. So there's resources there, but there's no channel other than giving family members money to help them. There's no channel. I've been thinking about these concepts and thinking about how to organize them. They set up an organization that I've been thinking about called 5,000 African Angels. Really, the goal would be to get 5,000 Africans together. I mean, we start with just the resources, just the knowledge base. It's so huge. Just all the physicians in the there's more Ghanaian trained physicians, they say, in New York than in Ghana. It's the same for Nigeria. 85% of them leave 5 years after medical school. So if we can find a way to bring them home, we can find a way to, so we need the two things, the resources in terms of knowledge and obviously the funding. If we're successful in any of these two, it would be huge. I started a company recently that is in the healthcare space with a goal of rolling into the fund, into the Healthcare Innovation Fund. And I reached out to the Africans within the Yale community, and they support it. They put money in the company. And a lot of them are in the medical space. There's a couple, both Yale alums, that put money in with the hope that they can also contribute their medical expertise. These two things we need to get to that point, but it's been a challenge. If I'm able to get 5,000 Africans to bring their resources and their money, I'm sure I can get even more from other places.
Interesting. Okay, so we have a question from Terrence. Terrence says, I've recently backed a ride-hailing startup operating in Uganda, Kenya, and Nigeria. It already feels a bit late. So where do you see the next frontier in African venture investments, both by industry and geography?
So there's several. I mentioned fast-moving consumer goods. That leads into manufacturing. There's fintech, there's ag tech, there's education, there's media and content, there's infrastructure, particularly like telecom infrastructure has been of interest, and I'm working on a few things in that space. Depending on what your outlook is, I'm working with some Yale alumni from forestry on reforestation. They have a unique program in that space. Obviously, then attract a lot of funding to people who want to grow our trees back and grow our forests back. That's been interesting, and it's going really well. So there's renewable energy, and then there's a slew of some of these accelerators like MEST, MEST. You can look them up. They're here in Ghana. I think they're in East Africa as well. They do a good job and definitely build a few of these companies. And then you can see how they trend. But in my experience, these are areas definitely that if you looked into, you could find very interesting things, specifically and particularly fast-moving consumer goods.
Okay. Let's see here. Kwame asks, what is the state business relationship like on the continent? Is the state more facilitating or inhibiting entrepreneurship?
I think the states are trying to they understand that, you can't, the days of the state running the business is over. If I had a choice, the state would have to get out of most businesses, or if anything, if they got into it, you give them a timeline for which they have to exit. It's a legacy of a bygone era that definitely is changing because technology is changing that. You can get out there on Instagram, market your product. So that's changing the landscape in that regard. A lot of governments are trying to make streamline registration. If they move to digital, it will make things easier. People don't line up to register their companies. The state is still a huge actor because they're the regulator, and they, in some cases, they pick winners and losers. But I think the needs in these parts are so great that if you get out there and you actually get to the people, and there's many ways to get to everybody now between Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, great opportunities that you can avoid the state.
Okay. Here's an interesting question from Jim. There's tremendous momentum for entrepreneurship and innovation in Africa. However, how do you foresee establishing synergies across initiatives in many different countries that focus on the same solutions while minimizing duplication of efforts? Sort of a complicated question, but an interesting one.
Yeah, that's where people like me come in. The things that we need that need to be Pan-African, we're definitely looking at and making sure that they're Pan-African. And that requires, as much as you can, some presence on the ground and some understanding of the regional synergies and the countries and the way they interact. But yeah, I mean, it requires partners on the ground who can see these things and put them together and have the connections in more than one country to make it happen. But I mean, when I was at Yale, and when I was in Houston, and when I was in Chicago, you see the same stories come through of what is entrepreneurial on the continent. But there's a whole lot more to it than that. So it's easy to think there's a lot of replication of effort into 54 countries. But the truth is, the details are definitely different from that. And the way to find opportunities that exist, because by the time these opportunities get to New York and they get published in some of these publications, it's the sexy stuff, right? It's never the real grunt work that is actually making a return. So, and again, that's where a partner like people like me come in. We're here and we can tell you what the needs are and what is possible.
Okay. So Adebayo has a question related to the housing that you were talking about at the beginning of your discussion. He wants to know, what's the ticket size for each hostel unit? What's the average return rate? Which countries have the best rates of return in this space? And besides hostels and EMRs, what other sectors are investor lucrative? So there are like several sub questions in there, but I think you kind of get the gist of that.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, student housing, I determined that requires local money. So if foreign money comes in, it has to have a plan to exit as quickly as you can, because cash flows for 20 to 25 years. And the deterioration of a lot of African currencies because of the sometimes mismanagement or just sometimes structural issues makes it difficult for you to preserve value over that period of time if you're investing dollars or euros or pounds or any kind of hard currency. The returns are very good. They're double-digit returns, north of 12.5%. So the returns are good in the space. But I have determined the best capital in the space is local pension fund money. Any foreign money has to make plans to exit literally after the buildings are built. If that makes any sense. What other industries? I mentioned them, fast moving consumer goods. It's not sexy, you're not gonna hear about it. It's not the motorcycle hailing stuff. It's not any of the other stuff you see in any of these magazines, but these are interesting areas. Healthcare, digital, anything. Fintech is huge. MasterCard is huge in this space, trying to juggle for space because they understand the value of it. MTN in Ghana literally doubled their reserves in mobile money in the last 3 months. And at last count, they had over $5 billion equivalent in balances in mobile money.
And Kodjo, maybe I'll ask on that, on the fintech side, you know, the mobile market, you know, the mobile is so big, and Africa kind of skipped the computer era and skipped straight to mobile.
Yes.
What do you see as the opportunity in fintech? Are the large companies like MTN kind of, you know, dominating that space, or do you still see room for investing in startups to take advantage of, you know, of the mobile proliferation?
Yeah, they're definitely dominating, but there's opportunity, and they see that, so they're doing everything to lock in their advantage, right? But I'm working with a guy here who has a soft and a hardware solution with partners like MasterCard and Visa. So now you have this strata of players, right? With the bank sitting somewhere in the middle. The government, understandably, doesn't like that. MTN has, you know, literally the government's budget every year in mobile money reserves, right? The government wants to cut their, you know, wants to cut them off for a little bit, right? You know, trim their wings a little bit. So the government is definitely open to other players and pushing other players and moving the laws a little bit to make sure it's easier for other players and other options to be available in the market. So definitely, it's an interesting area. What MTN hasn't successfully done is reached into some of the often ignored but still a lot of value areas, and that leaves a lot of opportunity. I'm literally working on a deal like that right now.
Interesting. Go ahead.
They can in this space, you can look at DPO Group out of East Africa. They sold recently for 288 million, like literally like 3 weeks ago. Out of East Africa, they had 50,000 customers.
We have time for probably 2 or 3 more questions. I want to save time for Sam to ask his question. I haven't forgotten about you, Sam. Here's an interesting question from Christopher. He asks, is there any real focus on sustainability as industries are building, particularly in rural areas? Do you see any opportunities for those interested in waste management and the logistics thereof?
Yes, waste management is huge. Again, these opportunities are there. Capital is a problem. You know, I'm working with a company that got, usually when you do waste management, people want to do it where it generates power and you sell it into the grid. And literally, you know, having come from power trading, commodity trading, I understand the space very well. You can build a factory that manages waste. It can generate electricity, and that electricity so there's a company that has a contract to do that and just hasn't found funding yet, because, you know, obviously if you're going to build that, you need some heavy funding, but they literally have commitments from the large government-owned utility to buy their energy generated from waste management at a fixed price. But funding is hard, and they come to me, and then I try to structure and help them. So sustainability is a huge thing. I think it needs leadership. Obviously, the kind of money that is coming here should be demanding these things. The only money that is here generally is development finance organizations, and you know, sometimes their priorities are not always in the, you know, in that kind of stuff, but definitely the opportunity to be sustainable and from the scratch, from the beginning.
I have an interesting question here from Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. Historically, Black Americans have not wanted to be perceived as part of the colonial system and have not actively relocated in large numbers to share expertise on the continent. You mentioned that Africans are encouraged to return home and contribute. Realistically, how welcoming is the continent to Black people who desire to become expats and operate as business owners and mentors? Is the primary need strictly monetary, or are there other types of resources welcomed right now as well?
Yeah, so that was the narrative until, you know, Ghana announced a year of return like last year. And even the government, they didn't do anything to help, and they were surprised. I went to the airport to pick my brother up, and there was no parking in the whole airport parking lot. Like literally 1 million people descended on Ghana, and a lot of money was made. A lot of people felt welcome. A lot of people wanted to buy homes. A lot of people wanted to come back again this year, but COVID. So those narratives have changed. Instagram and all these things are changing this narrative where you can see what is happening there, and you can find yourself in any of these endeavors that is happening. So it's changing. Places like Ghana have started issuing passports to, people in the diaspora. If you came here, you wanted to do something, you apply, they give you a passport. And I think if you let me, I'll give everybody a passport of some kind so they can come back. They'll feel welcome in light of some of the challenges that are there in the U.S. right now. So, so yeah, I mean, the opportunities are there, both monetary and and in sharing your expertise. And a lot of what we need is structural operational excellence, and definitely the opportunities are there to do that.
Okay. Sam, I think you get to have the last question.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Wendy. Kodjo, thank you so much for doing the webinar tonight. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. My last question is a fun one. Kodjo, you are an expert in Italian wines. I would normally ask on Italian wines, but I would love to know what are some great wines out of Africa right now, regions. I know South Africa has a big wine scene, but any recommendations for the audience for regions and varietals of great African wine?
Yeah, so I spent some time in South Africa late last year in, Stellenbosch. There are definitely a lot of interesting wines out of there. If you see anything Pinotage, a lot of people have never tried that. It's uniquely South African. So definitely, if you go in your Trader Joe's or your grocery store, or your wine shop, if you get a chance, pick up a Pinotage and try it. They're also very good Chenin Blancs from South Africa, and then Sauvignon Blancs as well. So these three would be great for whatever you're eating or drinking.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Perfect. Sam, you want to close it out, or should I?
Wendy, you do the honors.
Sure. So we just wanted to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Sam, thank you for moderating. Kodjo, thank you for joining us. You were fascinating. It's such a treat, and it's great to have yet another international Accelerate Yale webinar on the books here, and an honor to have our first one out of Accra with you. We want to just let everybody know that this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel within the next 48 hours, and we will also share it on our Facebook page and on our LinkedIn page, so tune in there. And our next webinar will be October 7th, which will be with Yale Law School grad Vivek Ramaswamy, who is JD 13. And Sam will be having a conversation with Vivek on how he has entered the biotech industry and really found ways to take struggling companies and transform them into incredibly successful ones. So please stay tuned for that webinar as well next month. And we'll be, if you have ideas or potential speakers you would like to tee up to us as potential guests on our webinar series, please reach out to any of us on the Accelerate Yale team. And with that, everybody is free to go. Thank you to all of you, but most of all, thank you to Kodjo. Have a great day, everybody. Okay, bye.
Thank you.